The Last of Us Part 2 is without a doubt one of, if not the most anticipated games of 2020, and we now have a release date of February 21st, and a ton of new details have come out thanks to the PlayStation blog and Neil Druckmann discussing a lot of new The Last of Us Part 2 details, and I want to go over the article in its entirety, and I do want to leave a link to the blog post in the description box below. It was done by Tim Terry, Senior Social Media Specialist over at Sony Interactive Entertainment America. A lot of insight from Neil Druckmann himself, the director of Last of Us Part 2, and he has shed light on the ambitious sequel in a very insightful conversation. When talking about the first ideas of the game, when did The Last of Us Part 2 story actually come into focus, Druckmann chuckles at the question and he recalls a meal shared with the masterful actors behind Ellie back in 2013. He noted, "I met with Ashley Johnson and I pitched her the idea for Left Behind, and I told her I had something else I was working on and I pitched her that idea, so she's there in the restaurant crying and I'm thinking, I hope people don't think I'm doing something horrible, but that's the first time I remember having some strong idea." As early as 2013, Druckmann had the basic beginning, middle, and end of the story in mind. The ending would ultimately change during the course of development, however, so this isn't a game that was just stagnant throughout the entirety of development. There was some evolution, and it looks like he did change how the game would conclude, and he noted that's how it starts. It's a kernel of an idea, then you bring more people in it, and it becomes a shared vision. Video games are this collaborative medium, and we all march towards this focused idea. When talking about the evolution of Ellie, which is a big aspect of The Last of Us Part 2, in The Last of Us Part 1, Ellie was more of a side character to Joel. Yes, she was an integral part of the story, but the story really focused around Joel. In The Last of Us Part 2, Ellie really does take center stage, which may rub some people the wrong way. Some people want to see Joel have a, focal point in the story of the game, and I'm sure he will. They're just not giving away everything to the game, so everybody should just relax a little bit. This is Naughty Dog. I'm sure they know what they're doing, but when Druckmann spoke on Ellie, he noted, in the first game, she's trying to find someone to rely on. She tells Joel that everyone I've known has died or left me, everyone except for you. She kind of latches onto Joel, and that was one of the emotional story points of The Last of Us. Of course, with The Last of Us' beginning, Joel also forges a very strong bond with Ellie, and their interplay and relationship is probably the biggest element of The Last of Us, and probably is the reason why so many of us got so emotionally invested into the story, and that's really something super difficult to do in a game, and I don't even think Uncharted really did it that well, and that is to hook the player from an emotional perspective. Look, I love Nathan Drake, I love the story with him and Sam, but I never really felt like I was emotionally invested into that game like I was to The Last of Us. Obviously, there are degrees to emotional investment, but The Last of Us, I think I speak for the majority of people, they rose that to another level, and that's really because of the relationship between Joel and Ellie and the general setting and seriousness that the game has versus an Uncharted. But nonetheless, Ellie and Joel's relationship is strained at the beginning of The Last of Us Part 2. Her new life in Jackson, Wyoming affords her a chance to make new connections with the survivors living there, and she's grown especially close to one fellow resident. Dina becomes the best friend she's now had for years. They flirt with each other, but Ellie doesn't quite know where this girl stands. We see that Dina feels very similarly to Ellie. Ultimately, Ellie's relatively comfortable, normal life in this post-pandemic world isn't destined to last. Druckmann alludes to a terrible incident that ignites Ellie on a deadly quest for revenge. Ellie wants to make it right by bringing the people responsible to justice, even if she has to go at it alone. This is kind of a similar trope in gaming where everything is fine for a little bit, you're enjoying the peaceful life, and I mean, how peaceful is it going to be in this post-pandemic environment? But everything's okay for a little bit, and then all hell breaks loose, and you go on this adventure that could cost you your very life, and that's exactly what happens with Ellie in The Last of Us Part 2. Druckmann also spoke on a litany of new enemies with the infected, and they are going to be emerging in a big way, and he noted in the first game, there's all this documentation about the different stages of the infection. Now we have to justify why there are different stages. Why are there mutations of these things? Without getting into it here, there is something about the environment and how much time has passed that has allowed these mutations to occur. Speaking on the various amount of infected in the game, he noted, we have runners that close the distance very quickly. We have clickers that move slowly but are one-hit kill. Shamblers provide this area of attack where they have this cloud of gaseous acid that burns materials around it. It burns your skin. The way you saw it in the demo is that they're mostly on their own. It gets really interesting because you could have a cloud that hurts you when you enter it, but it also blocks your view. Then runners burst through it, so the combinations get really interesting. It seems like from a gameplay aspect, with all of the new elements introduced with the infected, there's going to be quite a amount of depth in terms of how how all of the infected are going to attack you and all of the different gameplay elements, which is very exciting. The first Last of Us game I thought had great gameplay and great gameplay elements, and it really got you into the mood of it being an atmospheric game, a game that does rely a little bit more on stealth, but if you do play the game on easier difficulties, I mean, it wasn't that difficult to run and gun your way through it, and I'm sure it'll be similar in The Last of Us Part 2, so you can tailor the experience to exactly how you want to. So even if it does have more of a stealth emphasis, it's not gonna be like the game is gonna be brutally difficult if you play it on easy or whatever the case may be. Speaking of gameplay, Naughty Dog was trying to expand the grounded gameplay experience in The Last of Us Part 2, and here's what Druckmann said on that. Quote, "We're after a grounded experience, but that doesn't mean reality one-to-one. First of all, you don't have all the inputs you'd have in real life. Your inputs are limited to a controller, so with that, how do we create systems and an aesthetic that feels grounded? So Ellie couldn't kill as many people as she does in the demo in real life, but we need that number to create the tension. The tension is more important than a realistic body count." I think that's something that people really have to take away from this. I see so much of people saying, oh, this isn't realistic, it's not possible for Ellie, who is a smaller girl, to kill all of these infected, to fight all of these people. Well, at the end of the day, it's not all about just being realistic, it's about creating a compelling and engaging gameplay experience. That, more than anything, should be your #1 priority. Why are we going into these entertainment mediums always looking for realism? We go to these games to sometimes escape reality. Yes, there should be some emotional investment, but that reality comes in the form of creating a strong relationship between Ellie and Joel and other story elements. You also want a quality gameplay experience, and if it's completely realistic, if it's one-to-one to life, then there's only so much that we as humans can do, and Ellie as a main character should theoretically be able to do so. You have to disconnect from reality a little bit, and you do have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but it's a video game. At the end of the day, that shouldn't really be that big of a deal. So I really like that Druckmann went into detail on that, because that's something I see brought up over and over again on social media, Reddit, Twitter, whatever the case may be. He also noted, and likewise with the system, if you had these weapons, your life and death would rely on them. You would clean them, you would tend to them, so we created a systems and aesthetic. We really zoom the camera in and show you the weapon and how she works on them to improve them, to make you feel the connection she has to these instruments of death in a way, what it means to survive in this world. See, you do little things like that to keep you engaged into the experience, absorbed into the experience, because if you go too off the rails and make it completely disconnected, that level of investment and that atmospheric illusion does dissipate a little bit, so you need to find that balance, and I feel like Naughty Dog has been masters in finding that balance. He also noted animal threats. Dogs are a way to evolve human enemies to give them a new sense to sniff you out, no pun intended. They can rely on the sense of smell, and as Ellie moves around, she leaves behind this scent trail that fades over time, but if the dog picks up the trail, he can find you wherever you're hiding in a way that human on their own can't. But there is something when you can kill a dog that makes you feel worse than you kill a human. Again, that level of emotional investment, the way they do that, I think is very engaging, and obviously they're not breaking reality in any way doing that, but little things like that I feel like are gonna hook people more than if it was one-to-one to life and Ellie had to be stealthy the whole way through, so just bear that in mind. Some other things that they noted, they wanted to create believable human enemies. We want to treat violence as realistically as we can in an action game. One example is that every human enemy in the game features a unique name, such as Omar or Joe. For Naughty Dog, implementing this was a non-trivial task. A big effort that required not only new tech, but a lot of recording investment. The way they communicate is much more sophisticated. We do that in order to make you feel like it's not just like an NPC or a brain-dead obstacle. And again, the little things really come together to extend the atmosphere, a way that you can't really appreciate until the game actually comes together and you see everything working in cohesion and in action together. That's when you can really appreciate it. But Naughty Dog just saying, oh, every NPC has their own unique name, that probably doesn't get you excited. You're probably not thinking, oh my god, The Last of Us 2, there's an enemy called Omar, there's an enemy called Joe, that means I have to buy the game. No, that's not necessarily the thinking that gamers are gonna have. However, all of these things work in unison to create a more compelling and engaging gaming experience, and that's clearly what Naughty Dog is going for here. There's also an element of you having to choose when to fight. All the time, not are you gonna have to engage in combat. We wanted to have whole sequences that you could be spotted, engage in some combat, and escape without clearing the area. Likewise, we wanted to have way more sequences where you could ghost completely. It's very challenging and very hard, but it's possible to leave areas. Then there are certain situations where we want you engaged, we want you to partake in certain actions that are going to make you uncomfortable, but that's part of the narrative, that's part of Ellie's journey. They're exploring with larger areas, larger layouts, And he rounds out by talking about the technical fidelity. Just as with The Last of Us, we were hitting the limits of memory, of computational power, how many enemies we could have on screen, and the size levels. Now we're able to have much wider environment sequences with a horde of infected, several squads of enemies looking for you in big spaces. Likewise, Ellie has this whole new animation system called motion mapping. Not just Ellie, all the characters. It makes movement more responsive but also more realistic at the same time. So I think Ellie is one of the best controlling and looking third-person action characters out there. The fidelity we can get in the faces and the motion capture, we can better translate what actors are doing on stage into the game and get these nuances so we can rely more on the way someone blinks or the way they squint instead of lines of dialogue. It allows the writing to be much more nuanced than it's been before. And again, it's these little pieces of detail that me just reciting what Neil Druckmann said probably doesn't engage you all too much, but everything working together I think is just going to make for a far more captivating experience. He rounded out the statement just thanking PlayStation fans, and I'll leave the link to the entire blog post. There's a lot of gameplay there as well, so if you want to check it out, I would highly recommend it. The PlayStation blog is a great resource for a lot of information on a variety of different games, and hearing Neil Druckmann talk about the game specifically in a written form, it's very interesting, and I feel like Naughty Dog is hitting all the right areas for The Last of Us Part 2. There's a reason why so many gamers are excited for it. It is a Naughty Dog game, so it's not like I really need to sell you on the game, but it's easy to get very, very excited on it, and talking more about it just gets me more excited, so I wanted to make this video. And that is going to conclude this one. Sound off with all of your thoughts. What do you think about The Last of Us Part 2? What do you think about all of these details coming out? Because we've heard a lot over the last couple of weeks. And that's going to wrap up this one. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.